In 2006, High School Musical took over the world. Every teenage girl wanted Troy Bolton. Every boy wanted to be him. He was everything the early 2000s said a perfect guy should be: handsome, athletic, charming, and able to hit every note in a love song. The movie's success was more than just catchy pop tunes or a simple high school romance. It was timing and packaging. Disney Channel was in every home. And Zac Efron, with his effortless smile and flawless hair, became its crown jewel. His posters covered bedroom walls. His face was printed on lunchboxes. His name whispered in middle school hallways. But the same role that made him a global heartthrob also became his lifelong curse. For years, Efron was trapped inside an image he didn't control. A perfect boy frozen in glossy perfection. Then, on April 22, 2021, that illusion cracked, appearing in a special Earth Day event alongside Bill Nye. Efron spoke about saving the planet, but the world didn't hear a word. Instead, they stared. His face, swollen and his jawline unnaturally wide, became the internet's new obsession. Screenshots spread like wildfire. What happened to Zac Efron became the headline of the day. He stayed calm, smiling through the noise, until the online frenzy forced him to respond. He explained it was due to an old jaw injury. But to many, it felt like a cover story. Another layer of Hollywood polish hiding something deeper. This is not just a story about a face that changed. It's the story of a man who spent his entire career trying to escape a character. A prince Disney built, the world worshipped, and he could never quite erase. A man who wanted to be seen not for his looks, but for something real, and paid the price for perfection. Before he became a global heartthrob, Zac Efron was just a kid from San Luis Obispo, California, quiet, curious, and endlessly fascinated by performing. His parents weren't from the entertainment industry, but they noticed something in him. When his piano teacher suggested singing lessons, they agreed immediately. Soon, Zac was performing in community theater productions like Gypsy and Peter Pan, where his natural charm and focus stood out. Those early years taught him discipline, hitting marks, remembering lines, working with others, the unglamorous side of talent that would later become his foundation. By the early 2000s, Efron began appearing on television in small guest roles on ER, Firefly, and CSI Miami. These were modest steps, but they gave him what every young actor needs: experience in front of the camera. His first major break came with Summerland, a family drama that aired on the WB. It wasn't a cultural hit, but it was enough to get him noticed by casting agents. Ironically, Efron himself wasn't entirely sure he wanted a career in acting. In interviews before High School Musical premiered, he admitted that college seemed like the safer path, and acting might just be something to try before getting serious. Then came 2006. High School Musical premiered on the Disney Channel with modest expectations, a low-budget TV movie about teenagers singing in a gym. No one could have predicted what came next. The film became a phenomenon, drawing more than 7.7 million viewers on its first broadcast and turning its cast into overnight stars. The soundtrack topped the Billboard charts, and songs like Breaking Free became anthems of a generation. At the center of it all was Troy Bolton, the basketball captain who could also sing. The perfect balance of confidence and vulnerability. Zac Efron embodied him completely, and Disney knew it. His face appeared on posters, t-shirts, and magazine covers worldwide. He was no longer just an actor. He was the new face of teenage perfection. Yet, beneath the glittering success lay the seed of a lifelong struggle. The very thing that made him famous, his flawless image, also began to define him. Hollywood found a formula that sold, and it didn't want him to change. Every project that followed echoed the same archetype: the charming, talented boy next door. What began as a dream role had quietly turned into a mold, one that would shape, and soon confine, his entire career. Fame had arrived, and it was louder than ever. After High School Musical, Zac Efron became the face of a generation adored, marketable, unstoppable, Hollywood wanted more of him, and he delivered. In 2007, he starred in Hairspray as Link Larkin, the charming teen idol who could sing, dance, and melt hearts. The movie earned over $200 million worldwide and proved Efron could thrive beyond Disney. His charisma was effortless, his image flawless. 2 years later, 17 again hit theaters and opened at #1, confirming his power as a box office draw. The boy from a Disney Channel movie was now a legitimate Hollywood star. But that success came with strings attached. Every new project felt like a variation of the same formula: handsome, likable, slightly rebellious, but never too far from perfect. When he turned down the lead role in the Footloose remake, calling it a step backward. It was a subtle protest against being trapped in his own image, yet Hollywood had already decided what he should be, seeking something deeper. Zac began choosing roles that showed emotional range. In Charlie St. Cloud, he played a young man haunted by his brother's death. In The Lucky One, he trained with real Marines and gained nearly 9 kilograms of muscle to embody a war veteran. But no matter how hard he worked, the conversation always came back to the same thing: his looks. Critics praised his dedication, but focused on his perfect physique. Soon, his physical image became the product. In The Paperboy and That Awkward Moment, his body was the camera's obsession. Shirtless scenes, lingering close-ups, tabloid headlines. The same machine that built him now consumed him. At the 2014 MTV Movie Awards, when he won Best Shirtless Performance, he kept a promise and removed his shirt on stage. The audience erupted in applause. It was funny, viral, unforgettable, and quietly tragic. Zac Efron was at the peak of his fame, but the cost was clear. Hollywood didn't see him as an actor. It saw him as an image. The body that made him famous was no longer a gift. It was a cage. By the time Baywatch began filming in 2016, Zac Efron was no longer chasing stardom. He was trying to survive it. The role demanded a physique that bordered on superhuman, and he pushed his body to the edge to meet that expectation. Waking up at 4 a.m., training multiple times a day, eating the same meal over and over, and cutting out almost every carbohydrate. Efron sculpted a body that looked unreal because, as he later admitted, it was to achieve that dry, chiseled look. He took diuretics to drain water from his body, leaving his muscles sharply defined and his mind exhausted. The results were stunning on screen, but the price was brutal. He couldn't sleep. He was constantly anxious. And after filming ended, he fell into what he called a pretty bad depression. The body that made him a global icon had become a weapon against him. Then came the silence, away from cameras. Efron spiraled into drinking and substance abuse. In interviews years later, he confessed that fame had isolated him, that he'd lost connection with friends, and used alcohol to numb the pressure. By 2013, his struggle became impossible to hide. He quietly entered rehab, determined to rebuild his life before it was too late. He later credited Alcoholics Anonymous for saving him. But Hollywood never stops watching. In 2021, during an Earth Day special alongside Bill Nye, Efron reappeared and the internet erupted. His jawline looked dramatically different, broader and more angular. Within hours, Jawgate was trending worldwide. Memes, side-by-side comparisons, and armchair diagnoses flooded social media. What happened to Zac Efron became the question that drowned out his environmental message. When he finally addressed it a year later, his explanation seemed both simple and sad. He revealed that in 2013 he had slipped at home, shattered his jaw, and had it wired shut. Years of overcompensation by his jaw muscles had caused them to enlarge. But by then, few people cared about the truth. The internet had already made up its mind. This was the cruel paradox of Zac Efron's fame. The world demanded his perfection, then mocked him for changing. Every transformation, every scar, every moment of recovery was seen not as human, but as a malfunction in a product. The same face that once symbolized youth and beauty had become evidence of imperfection. And for Zac Efron, the man who once embodied the dream. That realization marked the start of his reckoning, after the chaos of Jawgate. Zac Efron disappeared for a while. No red carpets, no interviews, just quiet, for someone whose life had been a spectacle since his teenage years. The silence was almost shocking. But when he finally returned, he didn't come back as the polished Hollywood prince, he came back as something else entirely. His comeback wasn't through a blockbuster, but through honesty. In 2022, he sat down with Men's Health and talked openly about the toll his body transformations had taken, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the depression. He admitted that the Baywatch body everyone idolized was unrealistic and that he never wanted to look like that again. It was the first time the world heard him speak not as a star selling perfection, but as a man acknowledging pain. Then came The Greatest Showman and extremely wicked, shockingly evil and vile in these roles. Efron began reclaiming his craft as Ted Bundy. He used his charm, the very thing that had once trapped him, to portray something dark, manipulative, and deeply unsettling. It was both an artistic risk and a quiet rebellion against the image that had defined him. Critics took notice, calling it one of his most complex performances. But his real rebirth came in 2023 with The Iron Claw. To play wrestler Kevin Von Erich, Efron once again transformed physically. But this time it wasn't for vanity, it was for story. The film demanded emotional vulnerability beneath physical strength. And for the first time, his transformation felt purposeful. Critics praised him as haunting and career-defining. It was as if he had finally found a balance between body and soul, between performance and truth. Yet, even then, the old conversation returned. Online threads debated whether his bulked-up physique was natural. Articles dissected his diet, his jawline, his face. It was proof that no matter how much he evolved, the world still saw the surface first. Still, something was different this time. Zac Efron no longer chased approval, he chased meaning. His silence had turned into clarity. He had learned that fame is not freedom, and perfection is not peace. What remains now is not the Disney prince or the sculpted hero, but a man who has lived through both illusions and survived them. The image has cracked, but what's left behind is real and maybe. For the first time, that's enough. Zac Efron's journey is more than a Hollywood story. It is a reflection of how fame feeds on illusion. From a boy who sang about breaking free to a man trapped by the very image that made him famous, his life reveals the cost of a culture obsessed with appearances. Every time he rebuilt himself as a performer, as an artist, as a person, the world still measured him by how he looked, not who he was. He has faced the extremes of what celebrity can offer and destroy adoration that turns into scrutiny, perfection that becomes punishment, transformation that is mistaken for vanity. Yet, through it all, Efron has endured, learning to redefine success not by the mirror, but by meaning. His story reminds us that fame is not freedom. It is a lens one that magnifies beauty until it erases the person behind it. In chasing perfection, we often forget that the perfect image is never real. When your appearance has been your currency for too long, there comes a moment when people stop seeing anything else at all.